Greetings, greetings. Come in, take your shoes off, put your coat by the door, and welcome back to another Hearts of Iron 4 Dev Corner. Over the many weeks, if not maybe months now, we have covered a variety of dev corners, from talking about hydrodynamics and aerohydrodynamics to faction reworks and different content coming to Japan, China, Philippines, People's Republic of China. Ultimately, that has led us to today's Dev Corner, called East Asia, Chartering the Strategic Narrative. In a sense, this is really going to be a cumulative Dev Corner, talking about everything that has happened in the past to sum up what is going to be happening next, which is interesting from the perspective that it feels like Dev Corners might end soon and we go back to Dev Diaries. As such, this might be more of me just narrating things. So, feel free to sit back and listen, as there won't be any images or visuals really to work with. To counter that though, if we have time at the end, I might do a quick look into the previous week's Dev Corner, covering some of the art and portraits coming to the new countries. So, without further ado, let's head into this week's Dev Corner. They say that today's Dev Corner is different from previous ones, as it's not about presenting new ideas, thoughts or concepts. Instead, it ties together the East Asian arc they are currently building and how the features they have discussed fit together. They repeat that of course the countries they've shown so far are Japan, the Philippines and the People's Republic of China with Nationalist China. The pillars also they have shown are changes to the naval gameplay, faction dynamics and call and energy. Very interesting that they've chosen to word it as countries we have revealed so far. What do you mean so far? That very much so opens up the table for more countries getting opened into the discussion. Top of the line is probably Korea, then below that you've got Manchuria, then below that you've got the Warlords, I suppose. We do know some content will be changed for them, but it's also possible they might have gone back and made additional content for them worthy of discussion. Very interesting so far. The regional narrative. Japan invades China, the Pacific reacts. They start the game from a concrete situation. Japan will push into China, which stresses industry and supply on the mainland, pulls the Pacific into a contest over island chains and shipping lanes, and forces factions to define who they are and what they will tolerate. From that, their design narrative goals are as such. Number 1, industry tempo must be a strategic choice, not a foregone conclusion. With the introduction of coal will produce energy that will power the civilian, military and dockyards output along a base to fully powered scale. So we saw previously they're introducing the resource of coal. We have no idea how it's going to be distributed, but ultimately you're going to need it to keep your industry flowing. Economic laws now affect energy consumption, so pushing mobilization has a cost, while demobilizing at the right moment can be the better play. The goal will be to give you levers that tie mainland campaigns, maritime build-up, and home from politics into one readable economy without adding bookkeeping. This is also interesting for any of you that may remember that some time ago they had talked about wanting to add in demobilization mechanics, where your economy switches off a military economy back towards a civilian economy as the war winds down, which, of course, it is a World War II game, so to some extent you will always be caring exclusively about conflict, but now there is a reason for you to demobilize even if the conflict is still going, as you maybe need to prioritize the energy output because you already have all the equipment you need. Number 2. Sea control must matter at the right places and at the right times. This is why they are reshaping naval dominance. Dominance accumulates rather than flickering on and off. Thresholds vary by sea type and control brings tangible benefits such as fewer convoys along secure routes. The reintroduced home base system ties range and supply to where fleets are staged, and island categories create sensible caps, so not every dot in the ocean can host a megabase. All of that should support a Pacific that moves with readable momentum. So as we can see, this is really about shaping how that Pacific conflict is going to work, and to make it so that being able to, as for example America, naval invade Japan, or vice versa, Japan invade America, cannot be done from maybe just owning a single island in the Pacific, which is close to your opponent, and sending everything through there, because those docks are so far away from your home supply, they're so small on these little islands that they can't host your entire fleet, so you're going to need multiple ports to have enough range, supply, all of that, to be able to get the naval dominance over your opponent for you to be able to invade. Ultimately, this sounds like a justification mechanic to make it so that the whole island hopping thing that happened historically has a tangible in-game reason to exist. Otherwise, players would entirely bypass it and just naval invade from the Philippines. Just boop, go into Japan. Of course, the wonder is, how will this affect other stages? For example, if you're playing in South America, for example, how much weight does the British have down there exclusively from things like the Falklands, St. George, British Guyana, like all of these things added together? Is that enough to ensure that basically anybody in South America cannot escape the sphere of Britain? Or is it enough that those ports are so small that if, as Argentina, you wanted to invade Las Malvinas, then you could do so because they literally can't afford to station enough ships down there to beat your naval dominance? These are questions of balance, but they're the kind of questions I'm toying with when I read this kind of stuff. Number 3. Factions must act to their own doctrine, not just their ideology tag. Faction manifestos set long-term purpose. Goals push concrete actions, and rules define who can join and how members behave, and initiatives earned from goals let leaders evolve the faction. This turns the political layer into a set of strategic commitments that you feel on the map. Ultimately, I have basically no doubt that they will have nailed the historical major faction constructs, because there's the Axis, the Allies, the Comintern, the Chinese United Front, Co-Prosperity Sphere, and that's basically the core, and being able to define their goals is pretty straightforward. What will make or break this feature for me, because it's maybe among the things I'm most interested in, is will there be malleable factions for alternative history and creating your own? I think there are so many different types of alt history faction in the game at this point. I couldn't even imagine how you could accommodate for trying to describe all of the different goals each of these factions would have. I mean, there's a Habsburg faction which feels like its goal is exclusively to put Habsburgs on the thrones of every country in the world. How would that appear in the game? I mean, would it even appear in any capacity? I think maybe having specifics is unlikely, but if there isn't an option to define custom factions in any capacity, I would be disappointed, because the big one, the huge one, that seems to occur across so many countries is the European Union. And the idea of forming a faction called the European Union, and the faction doesn't have a path for federalization into one big country, just seems so strange, when that is, in the present day, kind of the goal and direction of what is happening. Sorry if this is too yappy, but ultimately it is a text-based dev diary. Okay, number 4. Martial virtues are an important part of society and shape the nature of warfare. In both Japan and in China, various aspects of martial virtue are an important part of forming the society in this era and shape of the war. This is perhaps mainly prevalent in how the country content has been constructed, but is also an important part of other features we have been working on. Well, they have been working on, not me. I'm not entirely sure I follow exactly what they're referring to with this. Maybe this ties more so into the balance of power-esque mechanic involving Japan's military, its navy, Zaibatsu, similar things happening in China, of course, where all of these different warlords are basically running independent armies of each other, have to amount to running one army against the Japanese, so maybe it's talking about that kind of conflict? I think my main takeaway from that is really that the East Asian warfront is an entirely different scope of theatre composed to the one in Europe, and they really are wanting to demonstrate this. This isn't just a European war in Asia, this is its own thing with its own rulebook. Why this matters for East Asia. Okay, let's keep going. Mainland tempo and energy choices. On the mainland, the pace of operations in China is tied to energy. A country that secures coal and manages law-driven consumption hits production targets earlier, but risks overextension elsewhere. A country that delays can stay flexible, but pays with a slower force buildup. Because output will scale with the energy ratio between base and fully powered, you see results quickly enough to learn and adjust mid-campaign. I do wonder then exactly how much coal China has access to if it's able to manage the transition of energy output so much. Japan, however, will need to go hunting for resources and coal in order to power its war machine, which can be done in different ways, partly through trade, but mainly through conquest. Other countries can try to stop Japan by either trade blockades or by contesting their aggression by force of arms, which basically means just countering them in the war. How much trade output do we think Japan really has access to in this time period? Who can they trade with, and who can they invade? I suppose you could forcibly annex Thailand, but they make for a much better ally. Sea lanes and islands. The Pacific is a logistics puzzle first and a battle map second. That is an interesting way of looking at it going forward. Naval dominance makes that visible. Patrols will build it up, escorts protect it, and raiders cut it down, and strike force amplifies the plan. The goal of establishing control across a shipping route reduces convoy needs, so a well-prepared island-hopping chain becomes an economic advantage, not just a staging line. Pair that with home base range and supply, and you get clear incentives to develop a few key harbours, then pivot them forward as your front advances. If the goal of this then is to secure an economic advantage using shipping lanes, the cost being convoys is strange to me, because I didn't consider that the need for convoys was actually going to be the bottleneck in securing energy. I actually just thought it was accessibility that was going to be the problem. Carriers will also pull their weight more consistently, with carrier air groups now defending against naval strikes and execute air missions while the task force is on assignment, which will keep pressure on contested seas without the carrier sitting idle. Strategic locations will also give a small set of islands extra capacity, where history and geography justify it, reinforcing the idea that not every atoll is equal. So I suppose if you are going to go island hopping, then going for the more historically prevalent islands might be worth your time more. But again, other than preparing for the ultimate naval invasion and just ensuring that the enemy can't invade you, I'm generally surprised you're doing this for economic advantage. Is the savings of convoys really worth it compared to, I don't know, not losing your navy to some sudden attack? Not to mention spending the fuel to power the navy so that you can afford to bring fuel back? Sorry, I'm just thinking. Ultimately, this is kind of just answering the questions of what the 4 previous points were in an extended form. Going back to factions, they want them to encourage you to act. Manifestos and goals will encourage behaviour that fits the theatre. In their notes, they contrasted Axis conquest goals with Japanese-led Sphere that prioritises resource security, coastal control, and puppet management. I feel like Germany had some desires to run some puppet states, but all good. That framing helps explain why East Asia, also with autarky, surely they'd care about resource. Anyway, that framing explains why East Asia asks for different actions than Europe, and why naval goals like coastal security sit beside resource and puppet aims. Mechanically though, which is the most important part, goals award initiatives that leaders use to change rules or add upgrades, such as research sharing or doctrine cooperation. Influence comes from contribution and participation, and higher influence means more say in how the faction evolves. I can imagine this having much more utility in multiplayer, where you're really organising with your faction what you need them to do to get the initiatives, to get the faction bonuses more. And that final 4th point, improved military planning. As faction leader, they want you to have more tools for directing your allies, guiding them towards what is important for you and the faction as a whole, and individual countries will have new ways of interacting with and customizing their armed forces. I do wonder, of course, whether that would ever include truly being able to dictate to faction members what you want them to do very specifically, like stay out of my line, go to this line, please defend these ports, you're not defending them, that kind of thing. And for the final section, how these pieces will all work together. The regional arc can be summed up as this. You secure energy and pick your tempo. Energy choices in the economy define how fast you can arm and build, which makes sense. Overreach can stall you at the worst time, so you need to establish naval dominance to secure supply, trade, and potential future naval invasions. On the faction side, use your faction to align your actions with manifestos and goals to push your coalition towards coherent aims, while initiatives, rules, and influence determine how flexible that coalition can be. Faction upgrades direct the nature of faction cooperation, whether it is research, more direct military cooperation, or building a strong intelligence network. Really, intelligence network. La Resistance. In this time of year, in this part of the country, localized entirely within Japan. I assume that would have to be just like extra operative slots, maybe building up intel speed, that kind of thing. That is the strategic narrative in one line. Japan's opening moves pull the Pacific into a logistics competition. China's response turns on energy, cohesion, and timing, and then the factions decide who can stomach what and who will pay to keep the sea routes open. All of this, of course, will have to be seen in the pudding, because this is, of course, words, and how it actually plays out in reality may be a very different story. So, what comes next? With this, they are rounding off this set of dev corners. They are ending dev corners. I thought they were ending dev corners. I'm not crazy. I knew he swapped those numbers. One after Magna Carta, as if I could make such a mistake. They have been valuable for them getting early feedback. I hope so. I'm not sure how useful I have been. I mean, I've offered some things here and there, but I guess we'll see. And they have applied several of your suggestions, not mine, across factions, naval dominance, and coal and energy. And they hope, you have appreciated the glimpses into what they have been working on. If you keep watching this space, you should be able to see more details of what they've been building and how feedback and iteration has shaped the work they do when Dev Diaries return proper in the not too distant future. You're telling me I don't get a break? You're telling me this is going to continue? That there's no break, 0 breaks, nil point. They do have a few surprises still as well. What did they mean by countries so far, by the way? So do stay tuned. Thanks for reading, and go tell them your feedback. Well, with that, we have come to the end of this week's summary Dev Corner, which is, I guess, the last Dev Corner. Ultimately, I think it's a good thing that they are showing us the thought process behind what they are going with this DLC version. I think after Graveyard of Empires, they're probably a little bit concerned about what the early reception is going to be, so they can moderate and adjust for opinion before the release, and then people get whiplash like, oh, what is this? If you want to know my early thoughts, I'd say I am looking forward to seeing coal, because I think a new resource could be interesting in terms of managing the economy while not keeping it too complicated. I'm really interested to see if faction rework is going to be something that has a lot of utility across the board, or whether it's just going to be like a gimmick applied to the main factions and then isn't used elsewhere. I will be kind of disappointed if it's a bit gimmicky and it's just, oh, it's a thing that we added for like the Axis, the Allies, China, Japan. That's really it. And it doesn't come up anywhere else. So unless you play historical, and you want to do the historical goals, it doesn't have any use. And I'll be like, okay, well, it's fine, it's good, but it's a bit gimmicky. Things I'm more cautious about is probably naval dominance, because one, I think players are so accustomed now to the way that naval supremacy works. I'm not saying it doesn't need to be changed, but I think there is an expectation of how it works, and it may change the meta in places that people might not have thought about yet. And that's one of my worries, that certain things might just be broken and have ruined certain aspects. I know that with Gotterdammerung, there was a lot of complaint about how difficult it was to invade the UK these days. Then you expedite that to basically every country that engages with a navy against a country that has a bigger navy. So will it be easier? Will it be harder? I suppose we'll see. And also, I'm very cautious to understand to what extent the utility will be of island hopping if you're not prioritizing navally invading your opponent. But please tell me what you think. What are you excited to see? What focus tree are you most excited to truly get to see? Because we've only seen glimpses here and there. I think I'm probably looking into Japan the most. Although, if one of those warlords gives me an emperor path, I will want to play that one, no doubt about it. With that being said, let's take a quick hop over to last week's Dev Corner and go see some art. We've been looking at text for far too long. People's faces. Dev Corner on character building and the faces of Redacted. I suppose that's the name of the DLC. It's a weird name for a DLC to call their DLC Redacted. Gotterdammerung, Graveyard of Empires, Redacted. Who am I to judge? With this came some changes to how some portraits will look due to player feedback. See, player feedback is being listened to. I guess this is the new one on the left and this is the old one on the right, and he's been made slightly younger to accommodate for the earlier time frame. Moving on down, we've got some lovely revolutionary looking characters, He, Lu, Ni and Peng, all with their red stars on their hat. Unfortunately, my historical knowledge at this point is lacking, so who each of the individuals are really isn't up to snuff. I do, however, recognise these two characters. This is Wang Ming, who I think is in the game currently, if memory serves me right, and Zhang Gutao, who I believe was an adversary of Mao. Maybe they kind of had conflict between the two, and as Mao grew in power, this guy got sidelined more and more. So maybe in an alternative route, this guy, Zhang on the right, can rise to power in favour of Mao, or alternatively, I think Wang Ming was the more Soviet Comintern aligned Chinese representative, who again, ultimately gets sidelined. Below that, we've got a very interesting image of undeniably a certain Mao Zedong on the left, but who's on his right? Who would be of equal stature and representation to Mao? A table of two. Is this 28.5 Bolsheviks, or is this a co-partner of some kind? A Korean, perhaps? Moving on down, you can see some of the Filipinos in the works. And my goodness, I always felt this about the Philippines. Such a variety of visual character that it's like, look at this. This guy versus this guy. They look so different. Also, the detail on this guy looks great. Look at the individual strands of hair all being pulled apart. Very well done. The blemishes on the face, even the shining in the glasses. This one really works well. I don't know why, I like this one the most. Alternatively, we could take a look at some characters inside of Philippines, Japan of course, and two American naval representatives, John Wilkes and a guy I forgot the name of. Thomas Hart. I definitely didn't tab out and check who he was. The representation of two additional Americans is interesting, especially if you could want to infer that America might be getting additional content for this DLC. This in no way says there's going to be an American focus tree or America's getting a rework or anything like that, but it does lend to the idea that America might be getting some content, even if it is just two portraits. If you're interested in looking at some of the advisors you could be getting, there is a whole host. And as I've said previously, because the naming convention has gone so far beyond the pale, it is impossible to infer what any of these do anymore. I mean, on one hand we've got Sergio over here, who is a silent workhorse, so that's going to be political power gain. We all know that. What does a Filipino nightingale give us? Is this plain icon supposed to represent a bird, a nightingale? Does she give me CAS attack bonuses? Does she give me air superiority, perhaps? Additionally, we could have the Sactalista editor over here, but more important than that, how about the coconut scientist? I mean, What does a coconut I'm sorry, it gets better. The silent killer? What? What? Why yes, I will have Jack the Ripper in my government. Thank you. Nationalist China hasn't been left out, with some strong portraits coming in, including Carson Chang there, giving us his blue steel stare. Like most characters, they are kind of looking at you, but this guy, the eye contact is immaculate. I simply feel inferior just even slightly looking at him. And let's end this video on some of the big names. We of course have got Tojo in the top right there, notably wearing a hat, so presumably doesn't want to get slapped on the back of the head, and maybe commiserations to some, because that is a reworked Hirohito portrait, and I have to say, where are the chins? A chinless experience. It does, however, come across as much more, I don't know, regal. He might have lost the hat, but he looks more defined, imperial, respectable, more comfortable, perhaps. Ultimately, it's a better portrait, but it has lost some of that meme quality along the way. Goodness, that is one respectable mustache. Wow. Okay. Thank you very much for watching this bonus Dev Corner session where we briefly go over looking at some of the art. Feel free to go back, stop and look for yourself on some of them. Maybe I missed somebody you wanted me to talk about because you felt they were worth talking about. But they are just pictures after all. With that, I'll say thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe. I'd say I'll see you next time for more Dev Corners, but, well, I don't know. I'll see you next time for more Dev Diaries, I suppose, whenever they finally arrive. And so, I guess that's that. Bye bye bye.